Does comprehensible input work? Does it work? My first answer for you, there's research on this, like tons of research. And I'm not gonna read the research to you. Maybe you also don't really want to read the research. Like maybe you're like, yeah, I know the research exists, but talk to me about kids, like real kids in classes, and does comprehensible input work in the classroom? I could share my experience with it, and maybe that would help you. I was teaching Spanish 2 and Spanish 1, and we only made the switch with Spanish 1 students. Spanish 2, we just kept doing what we'd been doing, like legacy teaching. They'd get a vocab list, we'd spend the week with the vocab, then we'd quiz, and then the second week we'd do whatever the grammar structure was for that week. We'd focus on that, and at the end of the second week, we'd test over the vocab and the grammar structures from the textbook, rinse and repeat all year long. Blogged a ton about what I've done with my ones since switching, but the two biggest things were adding stories, like lots of reading, and daily routines. Those would be the two biggest things that we switched. So we were no longer following that vocab list, quiz, grammar stuff, test pattern with ones anymore. With ones, we eventually started doing timed writing a couple of times a quarter or even once a month. One of these times, my Spanish 1 students had a timed writing. They had 5 minutes where they could just sit down and write, and they could write about anything they wanted in Spanish. Around the same time of year, my Spanish 2s had a writing assessment that was on a specific topic that we had been working on very carefully for this one, because it was like the big writing assessment. We worked on this, leading up to this. You know, there was a lot of time and effort that went into this. And then the big day came and they sat down and they wrote, and I read what they had done. And I thought, my ones could have done this 4 months ago, and they could have done this better. Now, I know this is just a story. It's just a story. It's just an experience. It's literally just one little example of something that had happened with my students a while ago. This is a while ago from when I first switched, because I remember just being like, oh my gosh, my 2s have had a year and a half longer than my 1s have at this point. And my 1s could have written circles around them. My 1s were producing stuff that my 2s probably would not have been able to read. If I'd handed them something that my 1s wrote in their time writing in their 5 minutes, my 2s would have been like, I don't know what this is. So does comprehensible input work? You can read the research. You're welcome to read the research. I encourage you to read the research. But in my personal experience, it did wonders for my children.